Since I'm a week behind on tips this year, I thought that I would do a double tip this week because I think the two work pretty well together. The first tip I'm going to show you today is how to add space for labels on the end of lines. This helps you put the mark label to the right of the last point on a line. And the second is how to create a year, month, quarter selector. So I'm connected to the Workout Wednesday Superstore sales dataset in this case. And the first thing I'm going to do is just build a simple view that is sales by region. I'm sorry, I want that down here. Oops, messed up. And I want to look at that by date. So let's just start by looking at it by continuous years. And we get something like that. And if we want to shrink it up and make it like spark lines, I can go ahead and do that as well. Make them independent. All right. So now, if I go ahead and turn on the label, and I tell it to turn on the most recent, and I like it to match the mark color, notice how my label is on top of the line, and even if I make it right aligned, so I'm going to make it right aligned in the middle, you'll see I still don't have enough room. What I want to do is I want to actually add space to the end of the lines so that I can actually see the labels. So I'm going to continue by unticking my show header and cleaning up my spark lines a bit here. So let me shrink this down. Okay, so that looks like a spark line. And do a tiny bit of formatting. So I'm going to just go ahead and get rid of the grid lines and get rid of 0 lines. Okay, there we go. Lastly, I'm going to just double click here and get rid of that. All right, so the first thing that I want to do here is I'm going to go ahead and create a calculation that gives me a little bit of buffer on the end of the line. So I'm going to call this my date buffer, or actually I'll call this my year buffer. And what I want to do here is I want to go ahead and use the date add function. And because I'm looking at data at the year level, I want to choose that. And then I want to add, let's just start by adding 1 year and see what happens. And then I need to add that to the max date in the data set. Okay, go ahead and put my second mustachio on there. All right, great. So now I've got this field called year buffer. I'm going to go ahead and make that continuous. And I'm going to just go ahead and make that a regular date. And now I want to do is just go ahead and add that to detail. And then I'm going to go ahead and add a reference line for that year. So I'm going to go ahead and pick year. I want to go ahead and pick my year buffer. I don't want a label on there. And you see how I've got a little bit of extra space now. I'll go ahead and turn the line off. Actually, I'll leave the line on there for now so you can see what happens. Okay, so now it looks like we almost see how some of the labels move to the right, but we didn't quite give it enough room. So there's a couple ways you could fix this. We could just go in here and manually add another year. So let's just add 2. And that looks like it did the trick. Another option, if you're unsure what number to use, is you could use a parameter and stick a parameter in that number instead and just kind of iterate through those. But I'll go ahead and go forward there. So that's like a dirt simple way. So I'm going to go ahead and edit my reference line and get rid of that line. And now I have enough breathing room for my my spark lines. Okay, so let's call this sales by year. And then I'm going to go ahead and duplicate that sheet. And let's see what we need to do if we want to do it at the quarterly level. So if I go ahead and hit the little plus sign, I've now got it by quarters. And it looks like I still have enough room, but I'm going to actually go ahead and create a separate buffer for my quarters. So I'm going to just go ahead and duplicate this. And I'm going to edit this one just because I like to have control over them separately. So I'll call this my quarter buffer. And in this case, I want to add quarters because I'm looking. I want it to match the date level that's in my view. So if I leave it at 2 and hit OK, let's go ahead and now drag quarter buffer onto here, and let's make this at the quarters. And I want to go ahead and add my reference line for my quarter buffer. No value, and let's turn the label off. Get rid of the recalculate. Okay, so you can see our lines right here. That's not quite enough. So I'm going to go ahead and edit this calculation, and I'll just kind of move it out of the way here. So let's maybe add 6 and see what happens. Okay, so that looks like it probably gave us enough room, so we're good to go there. And let's call this sales by quarter. And then let's duplicate this again. Oops, undo. Let's duplicate this again. And let's say we want to do it at the monthly level now. So now we've got month, and I'm just going to go ahead and duplicate my quarter buffer. Edit that, and let's call it month buffer. And again, I want to just go ahead and add that on there, hit OK. And this time I'm going to right click and drag my month buffer onto there, pick my continuous months. And now I need to add my reference line, so I want to go ahead and remove all reference lines first, and then add my reference line. And I want to do it on my month buffer. No label, no line, hit OK. Alright, so now we can see our month buffer. I think if I go back over here to my sales by quarter, I probably still have my, I want to remove one of these. I don't need both of them. So it had two of them on there. Okay, so now let's go ahead and edit our month buffer. And let's say we want it, we know it needs to be, about 1.5 to 2 years. So let's say like 18 months and hit apply. And there we go. Now we have a nice buffer for our months. So let's call this sales by month. Okay, great. So that kind of gets us through the first tip on how to add space for labels on the ends of the lines. But now what I want to do is I want to create a single view that allows the user to pick either year, quarter, or month. So I'm just going to go ahead and duplicate this sheet. And I'm going to go ahead and create a parameter. So I'm going to say choose a date level. And it's going to have 3 options in it. It's going to have year, quarter, and month. Hit OK. And I'm going to go ahead and show that parameter control. And for simplicity, let's just make it a single value list. And what we want to do now is we need to create a date calculation that allows us to create a new date field that's basically returns either years, quarters, or months. So I'm going to create a new field. I'm just going to call it date, make it very simple. And the syntax is going to be pretty straightforward here. First thing I'm going to do is I'm going to start with a case statement. I'm going to say choose date level. When they pick year, then I want to do a date trunk to the year level of my order date. I'm going to copy that, paste it in there twice. Quarter. And I want to truncate to the quarter when they pick quarter. And I want to truncate to the month when they pick month. And then I hit end. And then what I need to do is I need to now wrap the whole thing in a date function so that it comes back into Tableau as a date. So now I have this new date field. I'm going to just right click and drag that into the view on top of my month field. And I'm going to make it continuous. Okay, so now you can see I've got years, quarters, and months, but my labels, it looks like my labels aren't showing up. Okay, so let's go ahead and turn our labels on. And it looks like we've got okay, so we're okay. So what we need to do now is we need this reference line to kind of move dynamically. So I'm going to create another calculated field. That's my date reference line. And I want to kind of repeat that case statement. So I want to say case, choose a date. When, let's see, so I want to do when they pick year. Then I want to return my year buffer. And then I want to repeat that twice. When they pick quarter or month, I want this to return my quarter buffer, and I want this one to return my month buffer. Oops. And then again, I need to wrap this whole thing in a date. All right, so now we could take our date reference line, and I'm going to make that continuous. And I'm going to drag that into the view instead and do that at the continuous level. Let's go ahead and remove all reference lines. And now we want to go ahead and add a reference line. Again, I could either do it through the pane or by right-clicking. I'll just do it this way this time. So I'm going to do it on my date field. And I want to return my date reference line. No value, no line. Hit OK. And there we go. So now I can pick years, quarters, or months, and then my axis adjusts accordingly. Okay, so now I want to go ahead and turn on my mark labels. I want to label the ends of the lines. I'm okay with overlapping. And there we go. So notice how, I'm not exactly sure why this is, but our most recent option is no longer there. I'm wondering if I change this to, let's just say day, for example. Can I then turn that on? Nope. If anybody knows why that works the way it does, I'm all ears for learning that. But let's change it back to exact date. And I wonder if we make it an attribute and make it continuous. Okay, that didn't work either. Okay, so that's a fail there. So I'm not exactly sure why that works the way that it does. But you can see we've got our reference line out here 2 years out because that's our max date for that particular point. If I pick quarter, you'll see it now switches to June 30th. And if I pick month, it now goes to June 30th as well. So if I do year, it looks like 2 years may be too much. So what I could do is I could change my year buffer. Let's edit this and let's kind of just see what happens here. So 1, hit OK. And there we go. See that shifted over nice and neat there. Okay, very good. I like that. Okay, so the other thing we could do is, the last thing we might want to do is, if we actually do want a dot on the end instead, we could just say, we could just create a calculated field. We could say something like last date of sales. And I could say something like if the max date, let's see, max date is, and I want to do this in squigglies. So I could some max date in the view is equal to the date, then sales. End. Okay, and that should return us, and we probably want to do this for each region. So I could make this fixed at the region level. So I like to replace fixed with for each, and that way it's a little more dynamic. Hit OK. And now we've got last date of sales, and if I stick that there, we should see we get just the one on the end. So I can go ahead and make that dual axis. Right click and synchronize. And what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go ahead and get rid of this label. Hit OK. And then go ahead and hide that header. Okay. And lastly, I'm just going to go ahead and remove measure names from the color shelf and then hide my indicator. So now it looks like I have a nice little dot on the line like I saw before. Last step is to just clean up this axis. I don't really need that. And there we go. So now we have a nice, neat view. We've covered two things today. The first one is how to add space for labels on the ends of lines. And we have 3 examples. You see our year is slightly messed up now, quarters and months. And then we have the dynamic view that allows the user to pick the date level. So I hope you found that helpful, and I'll be back next week with another tip. Have a good day.